radio today about texture. My 6th grade students spend their quarter with me learning about the elements of art and the principles of design. We go through and we learn how to do a value scale and how to draw 3D forms and how to shade 3D forms. We learn about texture and developing space. So this is the texture lesson with colored pencils. So basic value shading and blending skills have already been established. And we're going to be working with 5 different texture lines. The first texture line that we're going to work with is called a hatching line. And the hatching line is just, need to move over a little bit, is in one direction, okay? So hatching lines go one way. Hatching lines can be used to create a lot of different textures. In art, we're working 2-dimensionally on the flat surface of the paper, but we're trying to give our drawings the illusion of 3 dimensions. So we use a lot of overlapping and textures and 3D form drawing and shading in order to do that. One of the most common things that we use in a landscape is grass. And if you are wanting to create the illusion of real grass, you are going to want to use the hatching line. What I tell my students is for textures, we work in layers. The first layer is just laying down a light color in the background so that you don't see white paper through your grass pieces. Okay, so I'm going to color my green. And then I'm going to come in and using varying amounts of pressure, I'm going to make hatching lines. And we do like a little bit of a windshield wiper effect, allowing the lines to overlap. You can use a medium shade of green as well, because there's not just one shade of grass, there's many different shades of grass. So my 6th graders are usually going through a phase of wanting to learn how to draw things realistically. And we talk about how in elementary school this was grass, in 1st and 2nd grade. And then sometimes we get this grass. And each stalk of grass, each individual piece of grass may look like that. But when we see it from a little ways away, multiple pieces of grass, this is going to look more realistic than if you do this all over your paper. So we're going to kind of work towards leaving behind those elementary drawing skills and advancing our skills to a higher level using textures. So that is one way that you can use hatching lines for textures. Another way that you can use hatching lines for textures is on water. Okay. And again, when we are making water, we want to use different values of a color, and we want to start with a light color. You're going to start, maybe you have a little bit of a river here. When you're working with hatching lines, you don't always have to go in a straight line. If you don't go in a straight line, it's called a contour line. A contour is going, so if there was a rock or something here, your water might flow around the rock, so your contour of your line is going to change a little bit. And notice I'm not coloring it in solid blue. When we were in elementary, if this was water, we would have just colored it blue. But we are trying to make things look more realistic, and what we need to know then includes a little bit of science. And the light reflecting off the surface of the water appears white in a lot of cases, especially if the water is moving. And so you're going to leave some white spaces, and you're going to use these contour lines to create the illusion of depth and different light reflecting off of the surface. You can use more than one color of blue, and that's going to help to do that as well. Then you have lowlights and highlights. Okay, We can have our rock here in the middle. Maybe it's brown. We can even color it so that it looks a little bit three-dimensional. We can do some shading around the outside edge. Okay. So your water is flowing around the rock using a hatching line, but also a contour line. It's kind of the same thing. They're synonymous. Okay. Other ways that we can use the hatching line in illustration and in drawing is with fire. Everybody wants to be able to make good fire. Okay. So again, we're working with a contour line. Your lines are going to go up. I like to lift off at the top. I kind of lift my pencil up. That gives a nice pointed line at the top. I'm going to start with my lightest color. And again, I'm going to leave some white to give that illusion of motion, that the fire is moving. Then I'm going to come in with my second value, my medium value. And then I'm going to come in with my darkest value, a little bit of red, and create contrast. You want there to be some contrast. Contrast is one of the principles of design that we learn about. Contrast is just the differences. If you just do yellow, it's not necessarily going to look like realistic fire, because fire is many different colors of yellow, orange, and red. Okay. Another object that is going to include contour and hatching lines would be the texture of a tree trunk. So if you had a tree growing here happily, happy trees with Mr. Bob Ross, right? Okay, so there's a tree trunk. Maybe it comes out a little bit at the base. Maybe there's a root here. Oh, I am sounding like Bob Ross. How fun. Okay. So I'm going to use my lightest brown, and our tree trunk is a cylinder, right? So we're going to use that shading skill of the cylinder, and we're going to do a darker value on the outside edge of your tree trunk, and it's going to be lighter in the center. It's going to be darker on the bottom of the branch and lighter on the top. And let it get a little bit darker again on that inside edge. You don't want it to look outlined though, remember. You always want it to be a gradual change and not an outline. So I've got my tree trunk here. Okay, so contour lines go with the flow, right? So I'm going to take my medium brown, and I'm going to come into create a hatching line for tree bark. Now, if there were a hole in the tree, I might have an area here, and there might be kind of a knot, and the lines are going to go around it. You're going to add some darker lines on the outside edge here, but your tree bark is an important detail to making your artwork look realistic. And again, it's just hatching lines. You can do short ones, you can do long ones. Depends on the type of a tree that you have. If you really want to be scientific, there are many different types of bark, and you can do some research into that if you want to. If I want this to look dark down inside of the hole, I can do some shading. Again, you don't want it to look outlined, but you do want some contrast, some lighter areas and some darker areas. So you do your hatching lines. Okay. So there are many other ways that you might find to use hatching lines. If you were drawing a dog or a cat, the fur of the dog or the cat would be hatching lines, and you would also have contours because it's going to go around the body. But that is about a 10-minute video, so I'm going to try to stop there. That's video 1 in the texture series about hatching lines. Sorry, cross hatching is next. Stay tuned, right? Thank you, guys.